Testing. Okay, here we go. You and I have something in common. We have a set allowance of compassion that we can show. We know that if we show compassion all the time to everyone, always, then it will lose meaning, because value comes from rarity. We'll have nothing left when we really need to show it. Most of us will keep our strongest compassion for our children, for our families. If I showed the strongest form of love for some douchebag on Twitter, what's left for my kids? But our compassion is being demanded by these social justice groups right now, and we are punished for not supporting hard enough. Our showing of compassion will be measured and then ranked, and the bottom 50% of us will be shamed for our poor showing. Few working class people can hope to compete with these professional displays of grief enacted by these celebrities and this new leisure class of the university social justice warrior and their ridiculous new language. All parents, well, they will withhold their greatest displays of compassion for their children, and like I said, they will be punished for it. When we come to understand this trap, we consider withdrawing our compassion rather than let it be weaponized back against us, which is ridiculous, but we genuinely consider not showing compassion when it is needed because we don't want to be used as the means to someone else's end. Often we don't support because we want to be offered the choice to support or not. We don't want an ultimatum. We don't want a threat. Often we don't support because we understand that being an ally just makes us the next to burn when the mob grows bored, turns their attention somewhere else where they grab you, and they invent something that you did wrong. Refusing to take the knee makes us evil, but taking the knee is to surrender, and we don't want to surrender. And of all things, seriously, why do we have to take the knee? There's so many things we could do. Why that? By now, let's face it, you and I are the bad guys. We look guilty as hell. We withhold our compassion when no one else does. It was judiciously deciding the circumstances of the displaying of one of our most important human emotions that made us the bad guy. Have you not heard? Silence is violence, but speech is hateful. Denying you're a racist is racism, so is pride in your culture, depending on your culture, of course. We believe all women, we don't believe all men, but we believe men and women are equal. Still no generals come forward to organize a resistance. And even if they did, who is the enemy and where are they hiding? And under what banner do we rally? Like I said, I'm no leader. Let me have another moment and try and make sense of some more of this for you. In this post-truth world, we do have enemies. And our non-existent generals, our heroes in hidings, seem unwilling to, or they cannot name these enemies. So let me do so and name another one now. Marxism. Marxism is the real deal. It's not even hiding. It's not a mythical creature. It's not a bad guy in a Bond movie. Karl Marx is the great destroyer. He is the world breaker. He has you in his sights. Even if you're not going to be the next one to be destroyed, you are in the line to be destroyed. Everything's got to go. By the end of this podcast, you'll understand why. Consider one of Marx's most important lines. Philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways, when the point is to change it. Consider what he's saying there. Most people would define philosophers as someone that makes a rational inquiry into the nature of reality. That is to say that there is a reality, that there is a reality that precedes thinking about it, and that we as people just want to know what the reality is. Marx is saying that philosophers must change the reality. Think of what the reality is, that you are a man or a woman. That can be changed. That you are free and innocent of a crime. Well, we can change that. That your children are yours. Perhaps that can be changed too. That you are alive and useful and deserving of human rights. This can all be changed, and Marx advocates that it is the philosopher, the person that explains everything to us, the wizard archetype, that should be involved in changing it. And there's a genius in that. We've always operated under the assumption that the scientist, the philosopher, the wizard archetype explains something to us, and then it is us that decides whether or not we should change it. Marx is just cutting out the middleman. The person that explains things to us, our teachers, our lecturers, they just explain the wrong thing to us and have us believe that which they want us to believe. They change the world that way. They explain to us that all white people are racist, that all men are toxic. And we set about, well, who wouldn't want to rid the world of racism and toxicity? There's a genius to that quote, but it is evil. And you see, we will all be in the firing line soon. I detest Marx for a lot of reasons. Mostly he was incompetent, just incompetent. He was wrong about almost everything. Let's go through a few of the things that he believed would happen. That capitalism would implode. Hasn't happened yet, looks unlikely to occur. It's been 130, 40 years since he died. Capitalism's never been stronger. It's not going anywhere. He thought it would implode in his lifetime. He thought that the revolution would kick off first where industrialism is the most advanced, and last where industrialism is the least advanced. This is wrong, and wrong again. England was the most industrially advanced country in the world at the time of Marx, and it hasn't been within a lion's roar of a revolution since the 1660s. The only revolution happened in Russia in 1917, and at that point, Russia wasn't even an industrialized society. It's hard for the proletariat to rise up against the bourgeois when there is no proletariat, no bourgeoisie. China was also agrarian when Mao came to power. It was Mao and Lenin/Stalin that dragged those respective countries into the industrialized era. He believed that the wealth of the bourgeois depended upon the labor of the proletariat. So wrong. The wealth of the bourgeois is dependent upon price in the marketplace. A big fat capitalist can have 1,000 skilled workers work for 1 million hours on something that has no value at all. Consider that chick Ghostbusters movie. How many man hours went into that, and it was horrible. No one saw that. It lost money. You wouldn't buy the rights for that thing. You can put as many hours into a thing as you want. If no one wants it, no one wants it. Conversely, a day trader or a gambler can make $1 million in a day without 1 second of proletariat labor. Marx believed that the proletariat is naturally revolutionary. No, definitely wrong. Revolutions have always been enacted by the highly academic children of a bourgeois family. Examples include Marx himself, son of a middle-class lawyer and a wealthy mother, his friend Engels, son of a capitalist who made like $500,000 a year in present-day money. Fidel Castro was the son of a wealthy farmer. Chairman Mao, again, son of a wealthy farmer. Lenin, son of a middle-class academic father and wealthy mother. Che Guevara, middle class, studied medicine. Rosa Luxemburg, daughter of a rich timber trader. Leon Trotsky, son of a wealthy Ukrainian farmer. The only truly poor revolutionary I can think of was Stalin, but a better word for Stalin might have just been murderer, perhaps butcher. Marx believed that the liberal ideology that promoted private property and individualism, that's what we live by today, was simply incompatible with the method of production of specialized labor. It's when one person stands in a line and performs one specific task for his or her whole life. This is completely wrong. Almost every person in the Western world does work a job with one skill as part of a team for long periods of their life. And at the same time, we all live in private property, and we are all individuals, as opposed to some beehive commune thing. The West hasn't collapsed into a heap of broken people, unable to reconcile themselves with work and private life. Mr. Marx also believed that corporate profits must necessarily fall to zero. This is taken directly from chapter 13 of volume 3 of Das Kapital. Someone's obviously forgotten to tell Google, Amazon and Facebook this, and trust me, there will be companies after those three that will make mega profits too. There's always going to be profits in companies, and those profits are always going to lure more capital into the market, so entrepreneurial people can be the next major shareholder of the next major profitable company. This is never going to stop. Marx is wrong, and he was perfectly, personally detestable. He raised his family in abject poverty, while several members, including his wife and some of his kids, died of curable diseases, which a doctor could have cured, but he had no money. He was born with lots of money, but he gave it all away for this revolution, which, to say it failed is wrong. I mean, it never started. And let's face it, any revolution that Karl Marx was backing was self-serving. Once he called it that it had to happen, investing in it wasn't altogether altruistic. Marx is a man that thought he had proven the revolution was absolutely inexorable, unstoppable, must happen, capitalism must, without a shadow of a doubt, produce its own downfall. Yet the same man spends his entire life and all his wealth trying to bring about this downfall artificially by throwing money at it whenever he could, only for it still to fail. One can't help but think that he never really, truly believed that it was inexorable if he was trying to create it.
Hello everybody, I'm Neil Down, live from AMAT, where we bring you the latest news that we think you should be able to hear. Leading our news bulletin tonight, a study out of Cornell University has revealed that left-handed female bassists in heavy metal bands over 6'1" and born in the month of April got paid 17% less than males in the same category over the same time period. Now this has understandably caused global concern and condemnation. Former U.S. President Barack Obama had the following to say on the matter.
Over the course of her career,
heavy metal, the rock girls
will earn on average hundreds of thousands of dollars less than a man who does the same work. Now that's wrong. I don't want that for Malia and Sasha. I don't want that for your daughters. I don't want that to be an example that any
fully sick nuts
ends up accepting.
In a joint statement released earlier today, Bono, from U2, and Bob Geldof, they're both Irish. They have announced they will be putting on a worldwide relief concert featuring only all-female heavy metal bands. Both of those bands will be starting the tour in early 2021. Now, token female bassists around the world have been outraged and have chosen to rally under the hashtag #MoreBling4Strings. While Sonic Youth have taken it one step further and announced that in celebration of Kim Gordon's contribution to the world of female bass guitar, their next 3 double live albums will be composed entirely of bass solos. Album sales are expected to suffer. In a great day for science, archaeologists have found a 4,000-year-old skeleton near Budapest. More good news. Immediately following the discovery, the same scientists were able to recreate the sound of a 4,000-year-old xylophone. And after the glorious success of the Defund the Police movement in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis City Council has been forced to reduce the cost of the Minneapolis police force quite substantially. One of the items on their to-do list is to reduce the phone bills to micro levels. They're doing them by requiring the police to use microphones. Apparently, they haven't been very impressed with the feedback. And finally, the president of AMAT has come forward to address the concerns made against this news work by a certain prominent citizen that our news station has not properly addressed the allegations of political bias in our reporting. He's addressed these concerns by making sure that that citizen will never be prominent again. And I suggest the rest of you low-life scum just sit there and listen. Don't ask stupid fucking questions, you ignorant peasants. Just eat what we feed you and stare into your phones and nod. It's not fucking hard to do. Just buy the products the sponsors are selling you and then go out and buy them again. We don't care. You have no options. So just drop this facade of outrage. Or I don't know, maybe it's real. Maybe you do really care about these things. It don't matter no how. Go on to YouTube. We own that too now. We've kicked off everyone we don't like. We own the marketplace. It just doesn't matter. But you insist on speaking.
Welcome back.
So what is Marxism really? It's the idea that there's a better world after capitalism. That all human beings are stuck with the ideas that are formed within the method of production that you were chained to. But to Marx and to Marxists, there's an era after the one that we live in now that we need hastily to move into. The problem is that it can never occur naturally. It has to be forced via bloody revolution. Every single solitary Marxist that you will ever meet, by definition of being Marxist, wants a bloody revolution. They want to do violence in the street. They want to burn and to kill and to loot and to destroy. That is what a Marxist is. There's no getting away from it. That is the truth. For Marx's ideas to come to fruition, people must die. It is inevitable. The rationale is that 99% of people, the proletariat that is, will be better off under communism. However, the 1%, the bourgeois, controls the method of getting to communism, that is power, the army, money, big corporations, politics, and they're stopping the 99% from achieving some paradise by keeping us stuck in this horrible thing called capitalism. Thus, the proletariat must rise up. And the proletariat had a golden opportunity to rise up in 1914. In 1914, the First World War broke out. Governments enlisted many of the proletariat men, taught them how to fight, put them in formation, armed them with guns, and sent them off to war. To every Marxist in Europe, this was the perfect opportunity for the proletariat, German, French, Italian, Russian, English brothers and sisters to join arms into a new European proletariat nation. It did not happen. French proletariat men would rather die next to French bourgeois men and French aristocrat men in French trenches facing the Germans. World War I was the ultimate proof that at that point in time, nationalism was stronger than communism. Communism should have happened if Marx's predictions were true. They were not. In the aftermath, in the hangover, there were a group of men that gathered in the city of Frankfurt in Germany to discuss why a communist revolution didn't take place during the First World War. Those group of men have become famous. Their names synonymous with Marxism. There's many crazy conspiracy theories about them, but you don't need to go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. The truth is scary enough. These men get called the Frankfurt School. You would probably have heard of them. They had to leave Europe because of Hitler, and they traveled to America. From America, they've been able to infiltrate every university through what gets called cultural media studies. And you've got to give credit where credit's due. These guys were the first guys to ever take a look at big corporations affecting the minds and the beliefs and the ideas of the common people. We're going to come back to this later, but it's super important. Not only is Marxism real, but Marxism has infiltrated almost every level of our society, and it's true. It's not a crazy conspiracy theory, it's true, and it's done it because of cultural media studies. Coming back to the problem of socialism simply not working. The Frankfurt School put their head together in 1923 and came up with the idea that socialism's fundamental issue was that the oppressed people of the world simply didn't know they were oppressed. Now, some people might think that if a man didn't think he was oppressed, then perhaps he wasn't. But these guys knew better. Just because one might not consider themselves a victim doesn't mean you weren't. You need to be told over and over and over again that you were a victim. Sound familiar? Does this sound like exactly what you're seeing today? This plan has been 100 years in the making, and it started with the Frankfurt School. These guys were stubborn enough to understand that if a strong working class man or woman didn't want to be told that they were a victim, no matter, you tell their children and then their grandchildren until you finally get the point across and you create an army of oppressed victims. This would finally prove that Marx was right, so they would never have to admit defeat. These guys will not give up until 99% of the population believes that 1% is destroying them, keeping them from their communist utopia. You might think I'm joking at this point, but I'm not. This is exactly true, and there is a mountain of evidence to support it. The greatest of the Frankfurt School was a guy called Max Horkheimer. He was one of their early leaders. One of the fundamental ideas of Horkheimer's work was that he believed we've lost our ability to reason because we aren't using reason to answer life's big questions. Rather, we are using it to get to the next problem in our lives, like we are born into the world accepting certain objective truths about how a man or a woman should live. And the only thing that we should ever use our brain for is how to get to those truths. But we never stop to ask ourselves whether or not these presumed truths about how we should live our lives are for real. So, for example, should we not murder? I mean, I've always just accepted that one, but perhaps we should question that. If I do wrong, should I feel guilt? Is it right for a child to have parents? All of these things, Horkheimer believes that we should question, but we can never really ever get to question them, because as soon as you start to question, or whether or not wealth is good, or whether or not crime should be imprisoned and punished, or whether or not we should have police, or whether we should have democracy, or whether or not we should have free speech, these fundamental building blocks of society, as soon as you question them, society says something like, please don't remove those building blocks. The entire kit and caboodle is balancing upon them. And so, society has to be shut up. And this is what Marxism is. And the primary tool of doing this is called critical theory. Perhaps the best way to define critical theory is to discuss traditional theory, or its opposite, or everything that isn't a critical theory. A theory is something that tries to explain something. So Einstein's theory of relativity explains that gravity is the curvature of space and time, or something like that. I don't really understand it. So a traditional theory is any sort of theory anywhere that serves the status quo. So if we consider something like constructing a building, concrete and steel and glass and right angles and buildings that don't fall down would be a very good traditional theory. That seems to serve building very well. If you walked onto a building site and said, we should use high tensile steel, high compression construction, and we should follow the schematics very well, everyone would nod their head and agree with you. Now in society, when you say we shouldn't have democracy, we shouldn't have freedom, we shouldn't have families, we shouldn't have wealth, we shouldn't have education, how do you ever get society to believe you? Now everyone that's ever tried that, society said, shut up and go away, we don't want to listen to you. Now that, in truth, yes, you are wrong. Families are a really good idea. But to the Marxists, you need to destroy all of that to move forward into the communist utopia. Here's a list of things that have to go for us to destroy the 1% that's stopping us from moving out of capitalism and into the communist utopia. You have to get rid of the family. You have to get rid of traditional men. You have to get rid of masculinity. You have to get rid of women as mothers. You have to get rid of democracy, freedom of speech, capitalism, working jobs. You have to get rid of meritocracy. You have to get the idea that you pay someone that works harder than another person more than the other person. There's a long list of things that you need to get rid of to bring down all of society, which is exactly what the Marxist is trying to do. Now, when you propose a theory like, I don't know, let's have a baby, keep it in a shoebox and raffle it out to a homeless person so they can raise it, everyone will say, no, let's stick with the family. Sticking with the family is a traditional theory. What the Marxist needs is a non-traditional theory, and they label it a critical theory. It's only through these critical theories of the neo-Marxists that we are able to attack the status quo. But where on earth would you find a group of largely inexperienced humans that could spend 3 to 5 years creating something that would never benefit anyone and call it an achievement? This is where we need to start looking at the American tertiary education system, at universities, at colleges.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
At Non-Offensive Punk Clothing Incorporated, we believe that little black dresses shouldn't be defined by how the world sees them. Our latest line of vertically challenged dresses of colour are the modern millennial boys' way of saying, I don't care what you think, whilst being conscious that as an ally it's not all about you. Our jeans come in a variety of social conscious sizes. See, we don't believe in straight leg jeans here. We've got heteronormative leg jeans starting from a very attractive $59 a pair. The skinny cut leg, well, skinny, now that was an offensive term used by the US military during the Somali Civil War. So our austere Somali warlord jeans start from as low as $49 a pair. Very nice. Loose cut jeans? Not in 2020, my son. Our super hot range of she was only experimenting with what she likes and doesn't like cut jeans are now buy one get one free. And boyfriend jeans are out. Self-coupled jeans are in. Why don't you pick yourself up a pair? And now for every pair of jeans sold this week, you will receive a free vegan leather belt. You can't beat it. Rush in to grab a bargain, lads, because at Non-Offensive Punk Clothing Incorporated, we've rebelled against rebelling.
There's a reason that the far-left neo-Marxists rose up on American campuses, and I touched on it before. It's the cultural media studies crowd. The very early neo-Marxists of the Frankfurt School sought to try and understand why the seriously oppressed proletariat, or so they thought, didn't rise up in a revolution during the First World War. And their answer was that big media corporations were plaguing their minds with Disney movies and Shirley Temple songs and Biggles comic books, and that the proletariat was so dumbed down by Walt Disney, Chuck Berry, and Errol Flynn movies that they couldn't possibly rise up because they were just stuck at home watching TV all day. So the early Marxists took a big, long look into how culture and media plagues our minds, and they wrote all the first stuff on this. Now that's something we really care about now. Yes, how much is Nike or Apple or Google having to do with how we believe? Where do these big corporations get off with taking, 0.0001% of the wealth, that is $100 million, and funding one political party or another? That's something that concerns us, and people go to university or to colleges to learn how that happens. It interests me. And as soon as you go to university and try and find out how these big corporations affect our culture, how media affects us, all of the foundational work done on this was done by the Marxists. Hence, everyone learning about this sort of stuff at college learns about Marxism. They don't go there to learn Marxism, but in trying to find out how big corporations control our lives, they get spoon-fed Marxism. And they get spoon-fed Marxism at the age of 17, 18, 19, and they are too young to push back on it at that age. And you can remember being that age. It was exciting and romantic to get out of school and to go to college, and you thought this was the beginning of something. And when they told you this big romantic notion that there's a utopia just over the horizon, we just have to destroy everything, well, tell me that doesn't appeal to a revolutionary young 18, 19-year-old. And this is how it works. However, to date I've been using somewhat mockingly the term re-education. But what if I just use the plain old education? That's what we're talking about now. A modern university education really is Marxist. There's so much to be thought about how these ultra-powerful globalist corporations, which are totally a new thing. But now we have to discuss globalization, and the Frankfurt School got on the ground floor. Don't dismiss these guys as being nothing. They're in the universities, and they're kind of rightfully in the universities. They did the work. They deserve to be there. But they are Marxists, and the Marxists require destruction of everything, and you are included in everything. So we must now discuss the battle for control of colleges and universities. The discussion of universities and of colleges will be a discussion for another podcast. But I do just want to finish off on the idea of why does it thrive on campus. I said the cultural media studies courses were the first big reason, and they are a very big reason. But the second big reason is that critical theory is seen as synonymous with emancipation from slavery, as Horkheimer himself said so. And every American white kid feels a hell of a lot of internal guilt about slavery. They want to free the slaves. Marxism provides them an opportunity to free the slaves. And guess who the slaves are? Themselves. Every time their parent says, you can't wear a skirt that short or you can't listen to your music that loud, they are being enslaved. They are being controlled. Marxism says, burn it all down. You reckon that doesn't sound good to an 18-year-old? The third reason that neo-Marxism and critical theory is so big on campus is it's just an easy course to pass. I mean, you think about doing engineering. That's something you can actually get wrong. You think about doing medicine. That's really serious, with some really serious real-world repercussions should you get it wrong. You can't get Marxism wrong. You can't get critical theory and cultural media studies wrong. It's just an easy pass. So what you and I face in the West when we face Marxism is a group of people who don't want to know reality and respond to it as best they can, as you and I do. They are people that want to change our reality. And the way that they think is that it must be changed to destroy everything so we can pass over a threshold and into a bright and positive future of this communist utopia. They truly believe that. They believe in doing so will be an act of emancipation. They believe that there are real enemies that are really controlling us all right now, and they must be destroyed. And we can name these enemies. One of them is clearly the straight white male. They don't believe that freedom of speech works for them, and that will be a conversation for another time. Anything that is the status quo has got to go. Christianity, democracy, they're on the list. Private property, a fair day's pay for a hard day's work, straight out the door. All of this has to go. And they've worked out that directly criticizing it, sort of like I just did then, simply doesn't work. So they've invented critical theory as a way of just criticizing everything all the time. Anything that is the status quo, it becomes good to criticize it. And you and I are stuck in the unenviable position that we are born into this world, this capitalist world, and we are learning how to survive in this world, and our choices of how to survive in a capitalist world makes us evil. Because we're playing the capitalist game, we are thereby supporting capitalism. Therefore, we are the enemy. You've got a choice. Either drown in the capitalist world because you don't play by its rules, or thrive in the capital world and be labeled evil. I told you at the beginning of this podcast, your name is on the list. And I know your name is on the list because you're listening to this podcast. Because you're listening to my channel, you are a person that is trying to survive in America, trying to survive in Australia, in England, in the West, in a European country. And if you're doing that, you must be playing by the Western rules, because that's how you get ahead. And in doing that, you are the enemy. They are coming for you. So what do we do to survive this? Well, the question really is, how do you dissuade someone of a bad idea? From time to time, both of my young children have thought it was a really good idea to take a huge big bite out of a lemon. And it was the easiest thing to dissuade them from ever doing it. I just handed them the lemon and say, bite. It took them 1 second to work out that biting a lemon was a horrible, horrible experience. They never did it again after they did it once. Unfortunately, that's not going to work here. We can't burn down America, show them how terrible it is, and then quickly rebuild it again, letting them learn the lesson. So the next obvious step would be to explain to them why they're wrong. But they're already brainwashed. They've been to Harvard and heard Harvard's best lecturers tell them what is true. They're not going to believe us over those guys. They're young, so they haven't had families yet, haven't worked jobs yet, haven't run businesses yet, so they don't know how the world works, so they can't rely on their intuition either. It's a hell of a pickle. First obvious solution is to defund the universities that teach this garbage. It's just started now here in Australia. Liberal arts degrees have just doubled in prices. This needs to happen globally. Those university courses aren't building a better and brighter America. They're not creating a brave new world. There's no utility in it. Those university courses can go. But you have to address the underlying issue. Why do those university courses start up in the first place? The real problem is globalism. Globalism creates Marxism. Well, more accurately, the human desire to find out, to predict the outcome of globalization, to predict what's going to happen when these huge, massive, multi-billion-dollar companies become so powerful. That's where Marxism gets its power from. Looking for the answer to that leads people to the cultural media studies degrees. To date, conservatives and centrists have just tried to dismiss globalism as a bad idea. It was the left that made a study of it, and that's why the left is winning. They've got the answer. The centrists, the libertarians, the right-wingers, the conservatives need to do a better job at answering the questions that young people have about globalist power. The bailouts for the banks, the corporate fat cats on Wall Street, the censorship of Google and YouTube and Twitter. They're real questions. Young people are going to have those questions, and it's us that needs to give them their answer. To date, it's the Marxists that have the best answer, and that's where their power comes from. The next thing you can do is have children, raise them well, have a relationship with them, and sit your kids down and talk about Marxism before they go to university. It's the easiest slam dunk of all time to explain why the labor theory of value was wrong. The second easiest slam dunk of all time is to display the hundreds of millions of deaths in communist Russia, in communist China, Cuba, Cambodia, more recently Venezuela. It should be easy to prove how bad communism has been in practice. Finally, the thing that we can all do is to have that important discussion with our children, with our peers, with our friends, with our family, about the horror of saying that the end justifies the means. I mean, really, burning it all down, destroying capitalism? How many deaths? How many families torn apart? How many people need to be destroyed to make this happen? And how can we ever look at a person and say, sorry, but you're just collateral for our communist ideals? Marxism's been around too long now to dismiss it as a flash-in-the-pan thing. It's going to be here forever. Everyone dreams of an ideal. It used to be the Christian heaven. A lot of people don't believe in that anymore, so now it's the Marxist utopia. We're stuck with this for a long time. It's going to be a long fight. Perhaps we'll be fighting it forever, but we have to fight it. We have no other choice. I've told you what it is. I've told you what you can do. Steel yourself. You're going to have to fight this one out. I am. Now join me. Be vigilant. Keep your eyes open, your head in a swivel. Fill your head with knowledge. Fill your family with love. Thank you for listening. Good night and good luck.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.